So moving right along with regard to an agenda for the day. I don't know why it's always okay. So in terms of the outline for today, I'm going to do a little bit of a recap of the way I introduced the meeting last time around in terms of the purpose of the Alliance. But I'm going to skip a lot of the Olmsted history and a lot of the 5-year plan items that I went into depth about last time around, so we can focus on the projects. But I do have those sorts of slides that people are feeling that we're out of context with the conversation. But I'm going to spend a good chunk of time giving updates on ongoing projects from the last 3 months, progress reports on things that we brought up or new things that we've learned in the last 3 months. Then we'll spend some time following up on the community concerns and park issues that were brought up at the last meeting. And then we'll open up the floor to any new issues that have materialized in the last 3 months, or things that we need that have popped up that we need to focus on and plan for future meetings. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So with that, the Olmsted Community Alliance, again, sort of set up, built out of our planning framework to really focus on continuing a dialogue between the Conservancy and the city with the park users. Its purpose is very simple in strengthening that relationship and open lines of communication and dialogue between the park users and the park managers. But in terms of objectives, we're really looking for people who want to represent their community and can share the information they learn in this room on a broader scale out in their community. But it's an opportunity for just general dialogue. It's really all about, in our mind, this process of making improvements in the parks that is structured through our 5-year plan process, where we reprioritize park improvement projects every 5 years. But again, continued park outreach. There's always issues that we need to continue to outreach. So the more we have this infrastructure in place, the better outreach will be, and the better public awareness will be about all the improvements and great things happening in the Olmsted parks. And then we're always trying to engage people in getting more involved, both in the Conservancy and our work, stewardship of the parks, and volunteer opportunities as they come up throughout the year. We are here in the West District, talking about the parks within the West District, but we have this conversation 4 other times throughout the city, talking about the parks in each district of the city. The wonderful thing about the Olmsted parks is they're spread throughout the entire city, but also in terms of community engagement, the challenge about that is that we need to have focused conversations about people and meet them in their neighborhoods. So that sort of effort is basically replicated 5 times every time we want to do it once. But, it's the same conversation, district specific, talking about maintenance, talking about capital projects, talking about park events, and then again, looking for feedback on any maintenance issues out there, any project design input throughout that process, and then again, getting people engaged in our work. The long-term goal, thinking about this, is beginning in 2021, moving through 2022 and into 2023. We're trying to build basically the structure of these district meetings. We're gonna then sort of try and identify some people who want to represent this group at a more of a system-wide conversation, and basically have that system-wide infrastructure in place by 2023, when we're really kicking off again the 5-year planning process, and we'll be going out and looking for much more community engagement more broadly moving forward. So it's all part of a plan, it's all part of a process, but we know we need to start and basically building up these conversations as that first step. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do it well. So your role, again, just to reinforce, is to, as best you can, communicate all this information and anything you can learn back out to your community, get people more engaged in this group, through recruitment, to try and get more people in the room, and again, be good stewards of your neck of the woods in the Olmsted Park system. So people you're going to see a lot of, not seeing my whole face, but you can see it there on the screen. But I am wonderfully assisted by Zach Garland, our community outreach manager, and Z, our marketing communications specialist, but she's also expanded her role into advocacy manager as well. We'll also be joined on occasion. We've got Greg Robinson in the room here today, our Director of Park Administration, but our Executive Director, Stephanie Crockett, our Director of Development, Katie Stevenson, and Bob Stotz, our Director of Operations. And for this district, District 1, District Supervisor Humbert Baez, and his two foremen, Devote and Anthony, taking care of the Parks and West District. Oh. There we go. That's how PowerPoint works. Thank you, Z. So again, with that, I'll pause for a moment if anyone has any questions or comments about really why we're in the room here today and how we're sort of thinking about this going forward. Anything on the Zoom, Z? Typically don't get a lot of comments on this first step when people want to dive into the projects.
Whatever shows.
Oh, you get to see my notes. Okay. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Yeah, I guess we'll find out. So again, no questions or comments. See? Okay. All right. So talking about the progress out in the parks. So last meeting we were discussing the Prospect Park shelter. One of the big things we were very excited about was putting forward a New York State consolidated funding application together to fully fund the restoration of the shelter building. That was unfortunately denied in this year's process. We did get a lot of constructive feedback on that proposal, and we're going to be moving forward with other funding opportunities. However, moving forward in this calendar year, the city does have funding $112,000 in place through the HUD Community Development Block Grants funding source that they are looking to move forward early this year in the bid process, and that's really going to address a lot of the utility services to the building and some sort of general abatement work of the building, really early action steps that we can build on. So significant money going in to move this process along, but sadly, that next step of taking this project to fruition will unfortunately going to get pushed back a year, but we're going to continue to stay at it for that funding. Yeah, yes. I don't need to mute now, right? Do I mute? I do mute. Oh man, this is going to be a challenge.
Brian, you said there was constructive feedback as to why the funding was denied. Can you talk a little bit about that feedback, and did they give a reason as to why the funding was denied for the project?
So there were some comments with regard to the actual historic significance of this building. We were going after a historic funding line item. And that was really the main question was basically that historic value on the grand scale of the projects we were in competition with. That's really the main one that I know. I could probably follow up with you a little more on maybe some of the smaller details. You know, I think there are a lot of funding sources through this consolidated process that New York State set up to sort of simplify the application process. And I think as we go back next year, you know, we're gonna find the right pot of money to get into. Okay, that's how I'm gonna mute in the future. So it wasn't an issue. Okay, just got a couple more projects to get through, and then we'll open up for more conversation. Actually, we're going to start conversation on this next project, and going to introduce an exciting project. I was able to announce last meeting that we had received a little over $600,000 to complete a pathway project in Prospect Park. The first step of that is hiring talented consultants to help us through this process. And we've got Molly Vendura. Is it just Molly Vendura Landscape Architecture? So I'm gonna turn the screen over to Molly to walk us through a little engagement and conversation on this pathway project. So I'll step away and Molly will step in.
Good evening. As Brian mentioned, I'm Molly Vendura. I'm a landscape architect, and I've been hired as a consultant to Olmsted Parks to put together the construction drawings and bid documents and to help with some of the construction administration for this Prospect Park Pathways project. So I'm going to spend a few minutes giving you some background on the project and then tell you what the scope of the work is that's proposed for the project. This here is an aerial view of Prospect Park. So it's basically 2 blocks. It's bounded on the west by Columbus Parkway, on the east by Prospect, on the north by Connecticut, and on the south by Porter. And then bisecting the park down the middle is Niagara Street. We have, I'll use the cursor here. This is a library that we're in right now. And we've got the parking lot here. We've got a shelter building up here that Brian was just talking about. And then some pathways, sort of quad-like pathways that bisect the park. And then we have perimeter sidewalks around the outside. So these are some photographs that show you the existing conditions of the pathways in the park. Right now, they're mostly asphalt, but there are some areas of concrete pathways. They were originally 6 feet wide, but with the grass encroaching on the edges as it does, we have a little bit less than a 6 foot width for the existing pathways right now. There's lights, some garbage totes and benches along the pathways. We've got a lot of nice mature trees within the park. And you can kind of see in the pictures, there is physical deterioration of the pathways, some heaving of the concrete, some places where asphalt has been patched or has some even uneven areas. Here's an example where the asphalt paths join up with some existing concrete paths or the concrete sidewalks along the perimeter. And then we have concrete around the shelter building, which we're going to take a look at and see if we might reconfigure it a little bit. This is an overview of a little bit of a regional picture of Prospect Park. It's within our linear Olmsted Park system, and it's near the western terminus and Front Park and the waterfront. So the yellow lines that you see on this diagram are existing pathways. The blue lines are either existing or proposed bike lanes. So we have some existing bike lanes on Porter here. and then a multi-use path that runs all the way to the waterfront and hooks up with the shoreline trail. And then we have proposed bike lanes on Niagara Street, this blue line here, and a proposed multi-use path on Bustye. That kind of gives you the picture of how the pathways in the park connect with the bigger system. And this is a zoom in of the pathways in the park and what we're proposing to do. So the black lines in this drawing are the proposed pathways that we'd like to reconstruct based on this project. So you'll see each of them have this central X. That's the historic alignment of the paths through the park, this X that goes through the center of each block. And then we also, on the western section, we're proposing, there's, we'll go back to the aerial for a second. On this western section, there's a diagonal path that bisects the park here. And then there's some other pathways that connect the sidewalks to the library and to the parking lot. So what we propose to do on that eastern half is we will retain the central X, and these other sidewalks that sort of bisect it in the middle. We'd like to make this a little more curvilinear, so it's more in keeping with the Olmsted sort of feel for the pathways. And it also provides some connection between the shelter building, the sidewalks, the library, and the parking lots. Over on the western section of the park, we're retaining this central historic X and proposing to eliminate this shortcut path here. This was most likely a footpath that was worn in the grass, and over the years it got paved and formalized. But the problem with this path is that it leads one right to the center of the block and encourages this mid-block crossing across Niagara Street. And so crossing in the middle of a block versus at the corner, and also crossing between parked cars is really not a safe option. Something I remember learning in kindergarten, don't cross between two parked cars. So we would like not to encourage that sort of movement through the parks. So it makes sense to retain these pathways on the eastern half because they are providing connections between buildings and functions. But we'd like to eliminate this one over here on the western section to discourage that unsafe crossing. I want to check, make sure I want to see anything else about that. Okay. Also, part of the scope of this project is to install new benches in the park. So these yellow asterisks that you see on the screen, they're approximate preliminary locations for where we'd like to put in or replace existing benches in the park. And also, as Brian mentioned, there is this greater vision for the shelter building. And so part of that greater vision is to perhaps have some kind of plaza, public plaza associated with this building. What that plaza will exactly be or what kind of benches or tables it might have on it really depends on the programming of the building down the road. So, until we have the funding in place to renovate this building and we decide what the uses are going to be in the building, we don't exactly know what we want this plaza space to look like. But we anticipate that there will be enough funding in this project, most likely, to at least get that hardscape in place. So you saw some of those existing pictures where there's a lot of concrete around the building. It's not in the best shape. So we're going to take another look about exactly how we want that concrete around the building laid out, where we might want to put in some hardscape for a plaza with the understanding that benches or any kind of tables that might go with that plaza would be most likely installed in a future phase when that building is renovated. this is a picture of the green benches are the existing benches in the park. And on the right, that's the standard style of bench that's going into the Olmsted parks as the benches get replaced. So that's a style of bench that we'll be putting into Prospect Park. So, you know, the big picture of this project is replace these internal pathways. We're going to widen them from 6 feet to 8 feet. That extra width will just make it more comfortable to walk side by side with your friend, you know, walk with your kids. And also if people are coming in the opposite direction, someone doesn't have to step off the path into the grass to let them by. It's much more comfortable width. It also allows for easier maintenance and snow removal because the maintenance guys will be able to drive a plow down these paths rather than having to get out a snow blower to clear the paths. So improved pathway widths, new benches, and then some improved hardscape, some kind of plaza area perhaps adjacent to the shelter building. And that's pretty much the scope of this project. We don't anticipate doing any work to the perimeter concrete sidewalks based on budget. And because of some upcoming city projects like the Niagara Street reconstruction, that we'll be redoing those sidewalks, at least on Niagara Street anyway. So if anybody has any questions, I will be happy to take them.
Comment from Stephanie regarding the prospect.
What?
So Stephanie commented from Olmsted. She said the state CFA funding for the prospect shelter restoration, the decline of the grant was due to the historic preservation element criteria not meeting as critical a level as other applicants. The state did give us feedback on other funds to consider for a more robust application in the future, and we plan to apply again this year.
See, we have a question in the back.
Is that the material you're planning to use? Is asphalt again, or is it something else?
What was the question? Sorry. Yeah, the material for the pathways in the interior of the park will be asphalt, and the material for the hardscape around the shelter building will be concrete. Good question. Thank you. All right, well, without further ado, then I'll hand it back to Brian.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, we're very excited about this project. We think it is you know, long overdue, but it's a fairly basic project in terms of fixing what we have and basically making pathways much more user friendly and maintainable. So it's an exciting project for us, but you know, really a fairly basic one. Hopefully one will be able to move through quite quickly. All right. Next, in terms of project, this is actually bridging between a project that we're excited to talk about moving forward and get some input on, and a community concern that was expressed at last meeting. Front Park in the last year, and basically through the COVID era, was experiencing a few traffic control management issues and perimeter security issues, and got a few graphics here to sort of help us lead us through the conversation from the plaza, from the entrances along Porter Avenue at Lakeview, and pedestrian entrances at the corner of Busty, and then as well back at Vermont, corner entrances into the park from Vermont at Busty. But through the city's participatory budgeting process, significant resources have been identified for both Front Park and Riverside Park to explore traffic control measures, both inside the park and really more so at the perimeter to control park access. This project is going to move forward this year, and I think thought it was worthwhile to bring up for conversation today, knowing that there will be more opportunity for feedback and sort of dialogue in terms of what actually gets done. But to sort of set the groundwork for people's concerns, building on the conversation we had last time about finding some way to break up the asphalt of the sort of central terrace from people speeding around the circles. So those things have been noted and are filed, but you know, again, a great service this Olmsted Community Alliance can provide is sort of beginning the conversation and laying the groundwork for input on these sorts of projects. So again, resources are identified. Timeline not entirely clear, but this year things will be moving. So wanted to sort of open up an opportunity to sort of start the conversation about where people are seeing issues in their daily walks and or maybe from their front porches perhaps, but also sort of just again start to gather info on where we can direct these resources to be most effective. So with that, again, wanted to gather some design input or sort of catalog concerns people have related to this issue that I know we're all well aware of, and sort of start the conversation, not finish the conversation on you know, how we address it. So with that, again, open up for a little bit of dialogue, specifically pertaining to the issues of traffic control and perimeter security at Front Park. Any thoughts or observations? We've got Mark in the room. I guess we'll take that as the first comment. Z, if we can get to that. And I will mute myself.
Brian, Mark Mitzkowski. I live right across from the park. By far the largest, the most serious issue in the park that I see on a daily basis is the use of the parking area as a speed zone. It's a raceway. It's occurring in the winter as well. I mean, last night, for example, the night before, 3 cars are spinning around the monument, doing wheelies, what have you, which happens during the summer as well. These congregations of vehicles, 10, 15, 30 of them, doing as they please, when they please. And what's really disgusting, frankly, is the police will drive in and drive back out. They won't even get out of the cars to stop them. And this has been going on for at least the last 5 years. Certainly the last 2 years are worse. And it continues, by far the worst. What is really even more concerning is one of these days, one of those yo-yos is going to lose control and it's going to go right into the playground and harm somebody. Seriously, probably fatal. And this message has been repeated over and over and over again. And it's, I don't even have the words to express my frustration at the lack of concern by the police, by anyone else we speak with. Yes, we talk about it, but nothing has been done. The only way you're going to stop that within the park are 2 ways, actually. A, you have to limit access, vehicular access to that park at night. And secondly, during the daytime or during use periods, you have to break that parking lot up so that you cannot ride around with vehicles, whatever they are, ATVs and so forth. ATVs are just as bad almost. I mean, the gangs, if you will, the motorcycle gangs, as I call them, 10, 15, 30, 50 of them, racing through the park, racing down the highways, the roads, same issue, same problem, right? By far the worst issue of all that I see. Maintenance, everything else, people enjoying the park. It's a pleasure to see kids playing and families. But when you see that occurring, it destroys the entire usage and the safety and the enjoyment of it. Thank you.
Sorry, I was making very eloquent statements there and no one got to hear them unless you were in the room. Apologize for that. But yeah, so again, I can appreciate that frustration. I think this is it. I think there's some hope with this funding that the city's identified that we'll be able to, I think address some of those issues. So that is a great point to note. And I think, again, noting the real serious problems as the highest priorities that need to be fixed is a great place to start. Any other additional concerns? We've got some.
Brian, can I speak to that? Yes, this is Councilmember Rivera. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. Sorry.
Mr. Michkowski is correct. He has voiced his concerns. We've had meetings on his front porch. We've seen videos of activities in the park that were beyond the control of police officers. And this year we asked our parks department to consider putting speed bumps in the park, just like they do in other parks. I don't know if they've had that conversation with you regarding speed bumps and perhaps sophisticated cameras where they can monitor the activities in the park and respond in real time. But it is a problem, and certainly we want to mitigate that. We want to make the park a good experience for everybody that goes through, including the kids, and public safety is very, very important. So we have to find a way to slow down the traffic and that big asphalt thing around the monument. We have to do a better job with regards to how people move in and out of the park through that parking lot. So I don't know if you've had that conversation with Mike Finn, but I've had those conversations with him, along with other council members who want more speed bumps in certain areas, including the park. So if you know something that, if you need me to do something with regards to that, in terms of allocating funds, I'd be willing to do that as well.
Other comments? Okay, so I don't know if you heard that comment. So what are the proposed changes so far? I guess what I'm saying, and I think this should be a refreshing to people, is there are no proposed changes yet. There's just resources that have been made available. So we're very much at the beginning of this process. I think we started this conversation in terms of what we might want to do at the last meeting. I think we're sort of reinforcing that and building on that today. As soon as I have information from the city on an exact timeline for those conversations and when they're going to bring consultants on board, I'll be keeping this group abreast of that, but I'll also be bringing these suggestions that the plaza itself is a top priority, racing going on there, and then, sort of deterring that, but also protecting, the places where specifically where children are playing through that process, which should be another component of that effort. So this is all good information. And I think right now we're in the sort of idea gathering phase that we can bring back to the city for further conversations. So welcome again, any ideas or thoughts, or just simply stating concerns related to experiences they've had in the park would be welcome.
Would that be an opportunity to break up the parking lot space with great infrastructure like bioretention?
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
From Christina, as an idea, would that be an opportunity to break up the parking lot space with green infrastructure like bioretention cells? From Linda, we want to go parking and the circle broken up with those black bears that look like little men with green hats. Jennifer Fenio, some traffic problems at Ferry Circle, both Ferry and Richmond Avenue have become raceways and more recently a superhighway for 18-wheel trucks. This is a residential intersection. It's scary for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Okay, great. So did everyone hear that, or do I need to summarize what you said?
This was all in the chat.
Okay, so there's some comments in the chat. Now I'm trying to remember what they all were, but I think the first one was the bioretention. So that'll be something that we need to, that the Conservancy will take the lead on diving into, because previously, and I think when we were doing the restoration of that terrace, from a historic preservation standpoint, the State Historic Preservation Office gets very particular about taking historic features and sort of breaking them up with different conditions. So hardscape is one thing, but introducing vegetation into something which was historically hardscape, they typically have a serious problem with. But I think we want to put everything on the table, so we'll explore those. That's a great idea, because it is such a massive impervious surface. But that is something that we've had issues with in the past here, and in MLK Park with the Humboldt Basin. There were also comments on that type of thing. But certainly reconfiguring parking and barriers, bumps, taking away sort of the smooth surface is another great idea. And we do have noted related to the circles, while not in the scope for this particular project, which is funds dedicated to Front Park to deal with the problems in Front Park. We are well aware of the pedestrian challenges at Ferry Circle and Symphony Circle, and really all of our circles around the city. And we have been having conversations at both the city and state level about some ideas about advancing that one along. So those are well noted issues that we will again keep you all informed on when progress is made. But we're moving all the pieces on the board forward as best we can. Any other final comments before we move on here?
Also suggested for large yellow gates used for state parks and dirt roads, they could be closed in the evening to prevent overnight accidents.
Okay, so limiting access at times of day, yeah, that is something that certainly has been brought up and discussed. There's a little bit of a management component to that needs to be worked out. In addition, this isn't just physical changes that prevent things. That's kind of a open and closed management issue. But again, that's on the table, and I think that again, would be effective, and we may find is a necessary piece of this project. So we'll bring that to the table as well. Okay, those are some great comments. Again, everything is getting recorded. We've got 3 different sets of notes happening here, so I'll be circling back to sort of summarize comments. And again, always, of course, keeping you abreast of information as soon as we have it about, additional conversations moving forward. So moving along, I think we're good in terms of comments. Some other system-wide improvements, just updating you all on, is we received a grant that I was able to announce last meeting. System-wide ash tree removal. Sadly, the emerald ash borer has decimated our canopy of ash trees within the city. The Conservancy has been actively providing some trees with treatment to prevent the decimation from the emerald ash borer, but some trees were either too far gone or just weren't able to be saved. died and were standing dead ash. So we were able to get about $95,000 worth of funds together to remove all that standing ash, and all of that work has been accomplished over this winter. So that's exciting to report. Also, moving forward this spring is going to be a new signage master plan, signage upgrades. Again, it's going to be in multiple phases. The first step is going to be refreshing all of our existing signs. As you probably noticed, some of them are very faded, not terribly informative. So all the existing signs within the Olmsted Parks are going to get a facelift and a little bit of a redesign with some better, brighter colors. And then the next phase, hopefully later this summer, will be the first phase of adding some new signs, some additional signs to enhance wayfinding, and also some opportunities for interpretation throughout the park system. So again, this is a system-wide project. It's going to be moving forward throughout the entire city, and certainly will be seen throughout the West District with all of our existing signs here. There is our, I think that summarizes our sort of project updates. Again, some system-wide things, some advancing things along within this district. I guess any final project-related questions or comments before we move on to some of the discussion we had last meeting about concerns? Anything popping up?
The question to Molly, but it was regarding the prospect shelter. Linda asked if there could be electric outside the shelter for outdoor events.
Okay, yeah, I think that is something that's step one in terms of the scope of work that the city's doing right now. I can verify exactly what is in and out in terms of utility improvements and upgrades to sort of allow for activation periodically now. But then certainly, in the next phase, we would be thinking about programming, for inside the building, outside the building, concessionaires, how we want to activate, and all those things would be covered. But perhaps, with the money that the city's bringing to the table, we can see about making that an early action item. That's a great idea. And I will circle back on that. Anything else? No, good. Okay. So in terms of conversation last meeting, there were 3 big items that were put on the table, and there was a lot of discussion around. First being an opportunity for sort of continued coordination related to the Peace Bridge issue, or issues, I guess, are sort of multifaceted. This has been a relatively slow burning issue at the moment, but we think probably worth bringing up. And I think I'd like to just add that I think the Conservancy would be willing to coordinate the first meeting if there was interest in sort of putting together a more rounded out coordination conversation, coalition, whatever we want to call it, in terms of just sharing information, between city, the Conservancy, Prospect Hill neighborhood, other stakeholders. If we think it's of value, I think the Conservancy would be happy to, orchestrate, set up, send the invites, coordinate that first conversation, so we can see, what sort of priorities, goals, objectives we might want to pursue. Knowing that, we certainly know this through our advocacy work. Being coordinated before the issues become very hot is always much better than trying to do that work at that moment when you need to start that campaign to write letters to the editor or contact elected officials at all levels. I do know there's a lot of great conversations and coordination already happening, but if there'd be some value in sort of organizing a group. I think in terms of a step forward, Conservancy would be happy to sort of start that up. So I guess moving through these issues, I think it'd be good maybe in the chat, or if anyone has any comments in the room on that idea, we can either take that a step forward or think about that as a future action as we move through the year. So any thoughts on that coming through on Zoom or in the room? People want to add?
I'd like to add, Brian,
I think we got.
can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
On the Peace Bridge and the plaza. Messages coming from the Peace Bridge itself with regards to whatever plans they have. If they do have plans, they haven't disclosed them to us. So we took the initiative on the Common Council to pass a unanimous resolution to send to the governor and representatives a resolve that they do not expand the plaza past the footprint where they're right now. And I think it's important that they hear other voices as well. I mean, they've heard my voice, the Common Council, speak up on behalf of the neighborhood, and they have. Senator Ryan and Assemblymember John Rivera have also supported not encroaching into the neighborhood. But we want to keep the pressure on the Peace Bridge. If they do have a plan, we'd like to know what the plan is. They tell us they don't have a plan, but the fact that there's talk about selling off Bust-I Avenue is there has to be a plan. They would never ask to purchase Bust-I Avenue without having a plan. Obviously happening behind closed doors, and your support and the Olmsted support and making sure that they don't encroach into the neighborhood and that we use that space that's there on the east side of Bust-I's green space, permanent green space. I'm talking about the land where the old Episcopal home used to be. We'd like to see that as permanent green space, the same as the other side of Vermont that the Peace Bridge owns and takes care of. So I'm glad you brought that up. That you like each to connect exactly what their plans are. If they don't have a plan, then let's just plan to make it permanent green space. And I think the neighborhood would support that as well. Thank you.
Hutchinson Chapel. Yeah, that is a one of those things that so this is about a question about the Hutchinson Chapel. Councilmember, I don't know if you have any information on that.
We've asked
I can also.
Yes, we've asked our inspections department to enforce the codes. The state owns the building and they should be taking care of it. We've sent letters to that effect to the state. I don't know if Valerie is on. She might have further information on that. But we want, with regards to the chapel, can you tell us?
Yes, permits and inspections did
where
they did go and inspect the property, and I believe a letter of violation was sent. They asked them to remedy the issue. And our office did have a conversation too with Stephen Golick from Empire State Development, who said that they are aware of the issues and that they are working on contracting with someone to fix the building.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, I think in terms of just an action that something that the Conservancy can do is supporting that statement that came out of the Common Council. And I think that's an action that I'll put on myself to work through our long range planning committee to get that support letter crafted up. So I'll probably be circling back with the councilman and, you know, again, you know, if the current channels of communication are functioning for now, you know, we'll just sort of keep this on the table for these meetings. And I guess welcome anyone who's a part of this group when if information comes up that they find through any venue to share that so that we can all support that effort. All right, moving along. Other question that came out of last meeting was related to the Columbus statue. Hey, all right, we got a new member of the group. The Columbus Monument, I did reach out to the Arts Commission and current conversations that they referenced were related to the Italian American Federation. And they reported that they had not heard anything from the Federation in quite a while, and we're going to make a request for feedback from them on their opinions on how things should move forward. But I do know that there are a number of other opinions outside of the Italian Heritage Group about this place and what the sort of future monument might reference. And again, I've sort of discussed that with the Arts Commission, and really in terms of next steps, keeping in touch with the Arts Commission on their process is the process on how this is moving forward. So nothing unfortunately significant to report out of that, but we are keeping tabs on it, and we'll share what we know when we know it. Any other thoughts or comments on that coming through, or anyone in the room want to share? All right. So the last thing that came up at the last meeting was related to Days Park maintenance and volunteer engagement opportunities. So we've put our heads together and sort of put together some thoughts and setup, and there's going to be announcements and set up to several volunteer events throughout the coming year that'll be organized. One being a park cleanup first thing in the spring to look for. That will sort of predate, sort of jumping around on these notes here. The park cleanup will allow for the operations team to come through and planning in April to do a full park aeration, overseed, and fertilization project. So sort of volunteer opportunity, maintenance sort of boost, and then come in with that turf project. Then in June, we're going to be planning and orchestrating an opportunity for a park planting project of all the beds and the annuals coming out of the greenhouse, and bed prep, mulching, etc. in June. And then we'll be orchestrating again in the fall an opportunity for leaf raking events. You know, we'll wait and see when the leaves come out of the trees. We're not going to shake them out of the tree before they hit the ground, but get those scheduled, as well as plan a bulb planting event towards the front end of that, because you typically want to plant the bulb September, October. So we'll get that on the ticket for that third event. And then it's been communicated, and we'll be keeping sort of tabs on just sort of increased daily monitoring and maintenance coming through the park. Being a smaller park, you know, typically the maintenance crews are not there for long periods of time, but we do need to make sure that they are regularly there and regularly taking care of the basic maintenance that you know, we do all around the rest of the park system. So that again is sort of a first stage. I think we're, you know, hoping that 2022 is a great year with these events. Zach will be point person on coordinating those out, making those successful and fun. So want to sort of show sort of a little bit of a plan, but also welcome any other thoughts or comments people have about this or any other ideas to tackle that issue. Debbie, imagine that. So wait, get the mic for Debbie and I'll mute.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for including this in the discussion. I just have a couple of questions. One idea that we had kind of tossed around a little bit was involving the Elmwood Village Charter School. Have we thought about, or has Zach thought about having a meeting with some of our block club and the school and Olmsted to kind of get them maybe to participate in some of these? To a block club meeting too. So that would be great. But this looks good so far. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just apologize. It's sort of tricky for me. I have to mute and unmute myself to respond. So it's like I'm in the room with Debbie and I can't immediately respond to what she says. Still working through the kinks on this, but yeah, those are great comments. I think yes, I think we've got time now, but now in April that will coordinate again another effort at that group conversation, and then as well, yeah, I think figuring out the logical time to sort of take this directly to the block club and vet it and get into the weeds on how we move forward. Yeah, we'll coordinate getting back in the room. Are you doing your meetings in person or are you doing them on Zoom now?
Our last meeting was actually 2 days ago and we did a combination, kind of like what you're doing.
Okay. Yeah, so okay, so meetings are in combination of Zoom and in person. There's a comment, okay.
So we have 2 comments in the chat from Taylor. What about engaging the local bars and businesses around the block for a seasonal cleanup fundraiser or a one-off cleaning event? So local businesses around Days Park. And another comment would be to engage the new Days Park Tavern to support the park. Days Park Tavern? They just opened up at the corner.
Hey, Brian, you were muted for all.
You're muted. Unmute.
Sorry, muted again. Oh, we got a comment in the room. See? Wait for the microphone. I'll mute.
Like the West Side Trash Mob that exists. It's like a nonprofit. It's like a small group, but they operate usually in the summer and the spring. I know some of the people that are on the board, but they plan like different events each month around the West Side, mostly for cleanup, and they just gather like a few dozen people and they walk around with bags and pick up trash, and maybe they would be interested in collaborating in some way with the Block Club, but just a thought.
All right, great. So, okay, we got a comment.
So Mary says, while there are some responsible bar owners on Ellen Street, the experience for our community has not been positive. Loud music, unruly patrons doing businesses without a license. This is the general experience of a neighborhood and not targeting a specific bar. So I guess what she's, Mary, correct us if I'm wrong, but you're saying like there may not be, the collaboration may be a tough ask for the bar owners because of the existing tensions.
Okay.
Yeah, but.
Still haven't very hard time yet.
Okay. So based.
We'll get the notes
Yep,
together.
okay.
Get into it. We're very much.
You just got to yell it out. Sorry, I was muted. So we've again covered projects. We've covered issues that have come to the table previously, but again, want to open up the floor for any new issues that people have had or concerns that have sprung up in the last 3 months. While people are thinking about that, I will introduce that citywide, where the City of Buffalo and the Conservancy are working together and developing a park user survey related to our ring roads. So during COVID and the need for social distancing, both Delaware Park and South Park ring roads were closed to vehicle traffic. I think there's been responses in the full range of loving it to disliking it. And we want to continue this conversation both sort of citywide through a user survey, and then will be opportunity for more of a discussion at both the South District and the Delaware District meetings coming up. So if you're interested in that conversation, please look for that survey coming forward. We'll be promoting that heavily, and it'll be open for quite a while. But then in-person conversations as well. We'll be discussing these topics, which are tend to be more citywide issues than just district issues. So welcome your participation there. But again, back to the thinker. Anything that has sort of sprung to mind from anyone in the room that hasn't been covered, yeah, we've got someone in the room, and then anyone on Zoom. Please raise your hand for Z to come around.
I just have a question about something you mentioned earlier, the former Columbus statue. What is the Italian American Federation's continued interest in that space? Do they own part of it? Like, what is maybe I missed something there.
I'm not totally clear. I mean, I think because they were so involved in the initial construction of the initial monument and the renaming of the park, they remain interested in celebrating their heritage at the site. But again, not having clearly heard from them in recent times to know exactly where they're at. Not sure I can answer that question, but again, the Arts Commission manages all public art and public art spaces. And this, because it was just taking the Columbus bust off, it remains a site of public art. So it's still sort of under their jurisdiction, even though the actual sculpture has been taken off the top. City of Buffalo owns the park. City of Buffalo owns the artwork too. Yeah, they own everything. Any sculpture of any kind that's placed in the park is a gift to the city that is owned by them in perpetuity. No, yeah, go ahead.
The Prospect Park, the building that is there, how and when, this is my first meeting, how and when we decide the use of that building. I understand there's some funding that's tied up and we're not quite sure when that might come through, but are there any ideas right now for how that building will be used?
Good question. Part of the design process will get into the details of like whether it becomes a concession space or a community use room. The building itself, in terms of its size and shape, it is in the front, just 100% a public restroom. So there's a front foyer and then a men's room and a women's room. So that would want to be the primary use, the primary service would be a restroom facility. There's a small open room in the back that you know, is pretty much a flexible space at this time. So as we sort of go through the design process, see what's possible, whether it's you know, a space that could be run with a concessionaire running a cafe or something as a possibility with sort of indoor outdoor seating, or potentially just a programmable space tied into that, because it is obviously a public building. Public use is priority number one. And then, you know, on the table at this time would be other ideas we haven't thought about. I think there's pros and cons to, you know, certain type programs in public parks versus on commercial districts. But, you know, I think at this time, we're trying to get the funding in place to sort of go through the design process and sort of put all the ideas on the table. Unfortunately, we didn't get that funding to start that up. So all the work being done now is really just infrastructure. You know, we know we're going to need good water lines, good gas lines, good electrical service. And that's really where the funding that we have is taking us. But that next step will be much more fun and exciting. Any other questions on that? Debbie?
Okay. It's not very cerebral, so it doesn't exactly go along with the thinker. I'm just wondering, are we supposed to have the same number of garbage cans in the parks during the winter as we do during the summer? 2 garbage cans, my husband reports, in Days Park.
I can't think of any reason why we would take them away, but I can't say that with total confidence that there's some reason why we would. So I will get back to you. And so the report is that we're missing one in Days, missing 2 in Days Park. Okay, so if there's a good reason, I'll give you that good reason. If there's not a good reason, we'll get you 2 garbage cans back at the park. Yeah,
Thank you.
For some reason, someone stole my recycling bin last week, and I can't seem to figure that out. So I don't know where these cans go. But thank you for that info, and I'll get back to you on that. Any other thoughts? We get anyone on any hands raised? Oh, yeah, Mark.
Brian, you all install the porta potties in the park. And I can tell you, being across from the park, they are centers for abuse in every respect you can possibly think of. Everything from drug use to being turned over, to being a plaything, to being hit with cars, you name it, it's being done. And, you know, I look at that and so what's the purpose? I mean, at the end of the day, they're not serving the purpose that you placed them there for. I don't know what the solution is. Perhaps just outright removal altogether, because they're not working as they are. In fact, I feel sorry for the gentleman that has to clean them and empty them and service them every week. You can just see he's just shaking his head. He doesn't know what to do. I mean, because they're in total disarray.
Yeah, that is a good note. We're struggling with this everywhere. Where, you know, during COVID, we had to close buildings, and porta potties became very important for, you know, the people who do need them. You know, when you need them, it's hard to argue with needing them. But we have made a concerted effort, both in the 5-year plan and working with the Deputy Commissioner of Parks, that really reactivating the park buildings for not only the ones that are seasonal, getting them open, getting them hygienic, removing, you know, challenges in terms of hygiene, getting them up to code, getting them ADA compliant, and then even more so getting them for year-round use is a top priority where we can. So that's where the Prospect Shelter project becomes the first thing out of the box that we go to the CFA process to fund. Days Park, or sorry, not Days Park, well, Days Park too, but Front Park does present a problem, is that there are no enclosed structures currently there to address that. So that, I think, is a something we should continue to talk about. You know, again, like you, I'm not sure there's a clear answer. You know, there've been discussions of increasing the frequency of cleaning, but certainly it is a challenge that we've been trying to work through with the city. But other than where we can, trying to get those buildings working as good as possible, because that is obviously the best place to service that need, is top priority. But there are some places where we don't have a clear solution to getting porta potties out. So it's a good point. And I think, you know, don't have some clear answers, but I think it's good to keep on our tabs moving forward. And Front Park is one of those issue areas. Any other comments coming in?
Mary Simpson wants to-
Oh, Mary wants to talk.
No, Mary wants.
Oh, shoot, I muted Mary.
Why did you do that, Brian? Brian, what is the status of the city parks master plan? I keep hearing it is still in a draft phase. I have been requesting a copy of it through proper channels. Do you know why it's still in a draft phase?
Okay. Yeah, that is the case. It is in a draft phase, and I don't unfortunately know the answer to that, but I would assume it's just getting a thorough review, and they want to make sure when they put it out, it's as close to perfect as possible. But I unfortunately can't answer that question. So I'll very excited for it to come out, and as soon as I hear something, I'll certainly share it in terms of preparation for that report to be released. But which I don't have any information for you. Mary.
Perhaps you can ask that. I
Any other-
understand that the draft report is being used to further study park relationships, and that has me concerned.
That is a good point. Yeah. Any other
Okay, you can mute me now, Brian.
comments coming in? I don't even trust the time. What time is it? 48. Okay. All right. So the last thing in terms of wrap up, there are no other comments. So I think we've got a decent turnout on Zoom. We've got a few hardy souls in the room, which I greatly appreciate. But you know, interested if anyone's got any thoughts about impediments to attendance that we can break through. I would welcome any thoughts and sort of a brief debrief on that. I will say, in terms of our outreach, we are developing a outreach plan cutting across a lot of sectors, sharing that with you guys now on this page in terms of community and cultural organizations, locally, recreation groups, churches, businesses, and schools. I would say, you know, if anyone has any thoughts about, you know, not only groups that should definitely be involved, again, send those on to Zach. Also, if you know a good contact with any of these, I mean, I put these up on the list. We've had some places where we're kind of making cold phone calls, found contacts, struggling to find contacts. So if anyone knows any direct contacts, we can welcome anyone sort of providing assistance in that effort. But we're just basically building out our list with everyone who comes into this room. You know, you are immediately on the email blast list. We're doing social media where we can, finding newsletters and local newspapers to reach out. But again, continuing to ask questions about who isn't at these meetings that needs to be, where can we advertise? Are there additional newsletters you know about that reach people in this community? Specifically reaching immigrant groups and other folks throughout the community is a priority. So again, welcome input now or in between meetings. Can reach out. Additionally, any thoughts you have related to the agenda? How is the Zoom working? We can talk about that for people who aren't in the room. It seems like it might be working well, but hard to say. So again, open up a little conversation, but also Zach, for any thoughts you have about how to make these meetings work well, will be welcomed. So we'll pause for a second if anyone has any thoughts to share on, again, outreach, focus, getting people in this room, getting people on the Zoom, if not in the room, or any thoughts about, what are barriers that we need to break down to get more folks here. Again, we've been getting first round, we got all sorts of interesting ideas that we employed for this round. So just want to keep that process going of turning every stone over in this effort. Anything coming through? We got one thought.
Is there been any outreach to any of the? I didn't see. I was confused. I didn't see it.
Yeah, I do realize Hispanics United is not on this list yet. That is a great point.
They're a big part of the community, especially.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, other groups, again, yeah, we would appreciate any leads or thoughts. That one, I live on Virginia Street. It's 3 blocks away, so I'll blame myself for that.
I guess along those lines, are any of these materials?
So yeah, that's something we haven't exactly turned the page on in terms of figuring out exactly how much of that we can do, but that's a good point. I think we have reached out to the International Institute, and there's one other group that does that work. We're sort of figuring out the costs associated. We do make all these materials available on the website, so it would be an easy thing to just have that additionally done for at least the meeting minutes for a summary to get them in on the next meeting. So that's a good point, and I think between now and the next meeting, probably something we'll advance on in moving that forward.
Yeah, we didn't really flyers, like people flyers, you put up like around, you know, like in road, probably we have to put a flyer to certain windows. Flyer, but there's like
Several organizations that could do that, including Journey's End, which has interpreting and translation services available. But I'm just thinking of like probably a dozen businesses on Niagara Street that serve predominantly Spanish-speaking Americans. So even if you just covered that language, would be a great start.
Any other thoughts coming through?
Chat, we have community fireworks, school food. Fireworks and school number 3.
Oh yeah, okay, yep. School. All right. So yeah, this has been great. I know we're kind of wrapping up, ending time. Again, this is a slow build. We're working through this process, figuring out as we go. But again, spreading the word on this, If you can and want to stay engaged, join our OCA Facebook group. And certainly contacting Zach, as well as we've got Z's contact info on here. Stay updated. Flyers can sometimes, things can change on a paper flyer, but the OCA website on the park site will always be the most up-to-date thing you can find. And again, there'll be resources, and again, we'll add to those resources as we can. Meeting minutes you should expect in a couple weeks up on the site, summarizing this meeting. Again, the next meeting, we are setting a sort of standardized schedule. I think it appeared on people who got the paper copy of the agenda, but the next meeting will be the second Wednesday in April 13th. Will be the next time this group gets together for the West District. So again, welcome any info between now and then through email. Again, you will hear from us if we don't hear from you on advancing things. I'll end with the note that 2022 is Frederick Law Olmsted's 200th birthday year, April 26th. But the entire year of celebration, April to April, there'll be a lot of fun activities happening. And to stay up to date on that, another site on our page, Olmsted 200. Be a lot of fun things going on throughout the year that I'll certainly bringing back to this group, but please stay engaged on those sorts of things as well. So thanks everybody for your time. Hopefully this wasn't too challenging for you all to follow along